Welcome to Wild Times in Minnesota Lake Country with Kelly and Carol.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Kelly, today, of course, we've got our winter season. We've got snow out there. We had a little rain last night, but we're going to talk about snow science because it's good to know what we're surrounded by.
That's what up north being wild is all about, is about snow. And it's not as fun when you don't have snow. We thrive on having snow. So we're getting a little scant on our snow levels in our area right now, and really hoping that there are some nice flakes coming our way in piles. But it has been strange since it's been a little warm, and as that snowpack starts to melt a little, get hard and crusty, and it's just not as fun to play in. So I'm looking forward to a nice pile of fluffy snow.
All right. So yes, we're going to talk a little bit about the actual snowflakes, how they look, how they're formed. We'll learn a little bit of, listen to snow because it does make a sound, and what happens when snow falls and all that cool stuff just ahead. And of course, Kelly has her mystery sound. So take it away, Kelly.
Yes. Well, I just thought, when you start talking about snow, it's interesting to think about how snow forms and the level of thickness that it can land in, and what that really means for visually looking at snow, as well as how it. Anyway, so I think it's kind of a cool little thing people are getting into. Maybe if it's like a staying at home thing, that people are getting into taking pictures of snowflakes more than ever. So, which I love. It's that macro photography is pretty amazing thing to do. But certainly, as it snows, it's the snowflakes are being formed by the water particles attaching to a dust particle or pollen or something in the air, and which causes a crystal to form. And each one of those crystals, as they form, may take on a different shape depending on the temperature as it's falling closer and closer to the earth. So those crystals are all different. You've heard every snowflake is different. They're all very individual, and really based on the temperature as it's getting closer to the earth, or as we're feeling those temperatures too. They all have 6 sides. So as they're forming those crystal shapes, and as it's colder, those crystal shapes will be a little bit more flatter compared to a little bit warmer, more intricate shape to those snowflakes as they fall. And then depending on the temperature, if it's warmer, they're going to come together a little bit more compared to colder. And that, anyway, it'll change the amount of air that's in between those snowflakes too. So that changes how we experience the snow once it reaches the ground. And of course it can. So fluffy snow is awesome. We have wet snow. There's snow that it feels like you're shoveling sand.
Wet bag of hammers.
Yes. And there's the snow that you can't wait for, because you can make a snowman and it compacts really good for a good snowball. There's that kind of snow too. And then we do see sometimes the frost, and this has been the frostiest year ever, I think.
I'd say I feel like we've had 80% of our days frost laden.
Yeah, that's a lot. That is a lot. But one thing that's coming to the forefront is the difference between hoarfrost and rime ice, and how that forms. So as you're driving around and everything's all white, the trees are covered in frost, you'll see sometimes that is formed as a hoarfrost, which is a much more crystally shaped frost, that's really formed when the air particles are not as wet as fog. So you can't really see the air particles because you don't see the fog. But hoarfrost will be, it'll hit the plants or the branches and create a crystal there that's a little bit, I don't know, softer to create that hoarfrost compared to rime ice. And we have had a lot of rime ice. Oh. So that's when the fog rolls in. So you wake up in the morning, it's really foggy, and the fog especially without any wind is, kind of all those particles, those heavy wet particles landing on the branches and leaves and plants and things and forming crystals that you'll see are a lot more, I think they look sharp, like really long crystals that look a little bit more sharp. So that's kind of super cooled right to the plant, or creating that super cooled, straight from almost a liquid to a crystal compared to more like a vapor to a crystal, which is more of the hoarfrost experience. Isn't that cool? So
which one is, we've had both kinds this year, or do we have a tendency to do, is it the rime ice you said?
So I feel like we started off with more hoarfrost in our area, and then it got really foggy. We were seeing a lot of foggy days, and then we got more into the rime ice, and it's a little bit thicker there.
Okay.
Or I think it looks thicker.
It does. It looks like rime ice rice.
Oh yeah, like because it's so sharp. Yeah, and pointy crystals. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I know I've noticed. Do they both fall to the ground eventually, or does the hoarfrost just melt? Because I've noticed the rime ice. I've noticed those little sharp little things on the ground. Like they've just dropped off the branches, or do they can just fall to the ground too? Correct?
Yeah, I think both do. So it kind of looks like it's snowing because it's,
right.
The wind picks up a little and off it comes, or the sun comes out later in the afternoon and it starts melting and dripping off of the trees and like snowflake like looking stuff. Yeah, and when it's and I've seen that both ways. Sometimes it's heavy, so the rime ice is a little heavier and dripping off straight down. But some of the hoarfrost as it falls down is a little bit lighter and will float through the air, dripping off of trees. That's just beautiful. I love that.
There's no real water content to frost as opposed to like a snowflake.
Well, they're both water. Yeah. But certainly the rime ice is heavier, is formed when, straight from that water to crystal super cooling experience compared to a water vapor to crystal.
Okay. All right. So hoarfrost, rime ice, snowflakes, they're all solids that we experience in winter.
That's what I just think water is the most amazing thing ever. There is no element like water. It has the properties of water are so varied. There just isn't any other element that can do what water can do in terms of, normally when things go from a liquid to a solid, it gets heavier and it sinks. Water? No, it floats. How is that possible? It's bizarre. It is amazing.
All right. So we're learning more about our snowy days here and frost, all the things when we look out the window during these months of December, January, February, March, April, sometimes May. But talking about snow science today on Wild Times in Minnesota Lake Country. So maybe let's talk a little bit about, we've kind of got the visual of a snowflake and the crystallization, and talking about how that affects the sound. snow makes, how it affects sounds, being that it is a solid form of water. But I was preparing for the show. I kind of looked up some information on snow science at Michigan State University and had a lot of amazing things just reading through some of their studies and kind of fun activities they have to study snow science. But some of the questions they were asking people to consider to become snow scientists, because we all can do that. And that's kind of the point of the show, Wild Times in Minnesota Lake Country, is to really get curious about what's happening around us in the wild world, because there's some kind of fun things happening. And the more you become aware of it, the more fun it is. So some of the things that they talk about that we could do and things to consider as you're out maybe walking your dog or snowshoeing or cross-country skiing is, what do you hear when snow is falling? Most of us are probably inside when snow is falling. Sometimes we have the opportunity to be out in a snowfall. So some of the things that you hear when snow is falling, like yesterday we had kind of a rainy, sleety mix. So, it sounded a little bit different, like more like raindrops. But some of the things too is that once snow falls, what does that sound like? What does the world sound like when we have a blanket of snow? So it's like Mother Nature opens up a blanket and puts it down on the ground all over us. But what does that do? The acoustics, how you think about in theaters and sound booths, people have things up on the wall to make the acoustics sound better. So sound is bouncing off the walls differently, but snow has that effect too. Also, some of the things that you might want to consider are, when why do you think there are these differences? Like Kelly was talking about the formation of the crystals. Sometimes we have bigger snowflakes, sometimes we have smaller flakes, sometimes we have the sleet, the ice. What do you think about the difference of these snow and how they affect the sounds around us? So if you want to be your own scientist, just consider some of those things, make some observations, write down temperatures when snow is falling, and also, what does it sound like? What does it sound like when cars are going down the hill, sliding on ice, sliding through intersections? I get to hear every day. But that's just maybe even take audio. If you have a recorder on your phone, we are so set up to be our own little scientists these days with our phones. Everybody has a recording device. So use that recording device to be a snow scientist and record, the snowfall, but also maybe record how it sounds when you're walking in the snow. So I did that the other day, and I'm going to share some of the sounds, or the sound I had. And this was on January 11th, in the middle of the afternoon. It was kind of a beautiful day outside, but Kelly, I'm going to have you guess what temperature it was.
There's definitely some crunchy sound happening there. It doesn't sound very deep.
Right.
The snow doesn't sound very deep. You're walking too fast. You can't walk that fast in deep snow. But yeah, there's definitely a little crunch there, but it's not like super loud. So I would say it's probably pretty close to that freezing point in the upper 20s or something.
You are correct. It was 27 degrees out that day.
Ooh, okay.
You kind of have, when you're walking in the melting snow, it's kind of more of a squishy sound.
Yeah.
And when you're walking, when it's colder out, it's more of a crisp kind of clip. And probably you're walking faster when it's cold, even faster than that when it's cold, because you want to get to the end of where you're going.
Well, so definitely when you say the colder it is, the louder it is. It seems like, so if you have a wet, warm snow, it's more of a soft, squishy sound compared to really cold snow, and it's super crunchy. I notice, when I'm watching wildlife, I'm trying to listen for birds in the woods or something, or I see an animal that I want to get a picture of or something. The colder it is, the louder I am trying to get settled with the camera or something, and I scare it off because the snow is so loud. You can't get through the woods without making too much noise. So it's kind of irritating on a warm day when your footprints are a little softer. It's a little easier, but definitely cold, crunchy snow is hard to be quiet.
Right. Some of the other things they were talking about, the snow scientists, people who actually do study snow at the Michigan State University, they were talking about, how like you were talking about the physical characteristics of snowflakes and how, they're a little bit more open. They have holes. We all have cut out the snowflakes and you have the holes. That's kind of what makes the snowflakes, but that's how they fall. So the snowflakes are open and they're more of a fluffy kind of cushy thing that floats, so they fall quietly. So if a snowflake falls in the woods, does anybody hear it? So when you have billions, trillions, gazillions of snowflakes on the ground in that blanket, it adds, kind of a cushion. So the sound on a winter day, so a winter night, it's going to be a little bit more muffled. If a coyote sounds in the woods, we've heard coyote sounds, but you're not going to hear that as clearly. So it might be a little more muffled than, if it is, ice covered. If you're getting the sound across the lake, it's going to be a little bit more clear, because the lake is covered in ice, as opposed to a field that's covered in snow. It's going to be a little bit more muffled. So just those things that affect the acoustics. So if you're out on a desolate lake in the middle of it, ice fishing at midnight, take note of the sounds and see how clear those are. When the guy in the fish house, like 2 miles away, you can hear him drilling a hole, but you probably wouldn't be able to hear that in a field. You wouldn't be fishing in a field, obviously.
Oh, sure.
Anyway, so it's just, it kind of muffles it a little bit more when the snow is blanketing the earth than if you're on ice. Where the sound would travel fast. And that's because the audio waves carry differently in, like say the snowflake, the fluffy snowflake, or the compact raindrop. But it's all that kind of study of sound waves, how those hit, the snow, and it's very interesting. So just some things to consider.
I wonder if, so owls start mating in February and are hooting at night in the woods a lot and hooting and hollering. And so I wonder if they're if they're louder in February than they are other times of the year. They have to be louder because in the woods with all that snow, their sound is muffled more.
Well, maybe they have to they know how to position themselves just to find that mate.
Yep.
It's part of their process.
Yeah. Well, there's certainly other animals that, are affected by the snow, like you were saying, whether or not how much air is within that pack of snow. And there are animals like, the grouse that will dive into the snow and spend the night under the pack of snow. And if you don't have a lot to insulate them, then that's kind of unfortunate. There might be a little colder, especially if there's no snow and it's really cold. That's bad. It's a little harder on most animals, I would say, when there's not the depth of snow isn't there, and or animals that are trying to find food and have to remove snow to find food on the ground, or deer and things like that. They're certainly, being able to reach branch buds and things like that as well. But the animals that can't reach that high, like rabbits, are eating things. I love how you can tell how deep the snow is, especially if beaver or something are chewing on branches. And I remember one spring, that must have been the tallest beaver ever because the chew mark was like 3 feet above the ground. How did he possibly reach? Of course, we had 2 feet of packed snow that he was walking on top of to cut the tree at that level. But yeah, it is kind of a neat phenomenon in terms of, you know, how wildlife relate. They certainly, a lot of wildlife need that insulating snow on top. You know, you've got your voles making tunnels underneath the snow, and even red squirrels will tunnel underneath the snow, which is a great protectant from them, for predators, you know, to be able to be underneath that snow. So not having enough snow is kind of detrimental for some.
Mm-hmm. Wild Times in Minnesota Lake Country with Kelly and Carol and Snow Science. And Kelly, this brings us to our mystery sound today, and maybe you could give us a little clue as to what we're going to hear.
Yes, so we've talked a lot about stepping on snow, snowshoeing. There are lots of activities that you can do outside in the wintertime, and maybe you can guess this one based on this sound. So it's watery.
Yes. Is it a bathroom that you take when you
No, it doesn't.
So it has to do maybe with, well, obviously with water and ice. Are you scooping something out of the water?
Yeah. There you go. You got to hear that tossing the ice chunks out of the water there. So of course, you would do that if you had just drilled a hole in the ice and had to clean the ice remnants out of the hole so that it's a nice, clear, crisp hole for ice fishing, so you can pull that ginormous walleye out of the hole or crappie out of the hole. Yes, I like a nice, clean ice hole. Don't you?
Sure. Well, that's cool. That's yeah. So yet another way you can use your little recording device and observe. The sounds. The sounds of winter and ice and snow and all the good stuff. So we are coming to the end of our another episode of Wild Times in Minnesota Lake Country. And, you know, maybe eventually we'll get out on the ice and have our own wild time out there. One of the great activities we can do in the wintertime, a very popular activity as you look out on many area lakes, lots of ice houses, ice shacks out there this year. So people are taking advantage of the ice conditions, which are not always 100% safe. We have to give her a little PSA there. But hopefully Kelly and I may get out on the ice soon and do our own ice fishing experience, because it's usually a wild time.
Wild times.
When we get together outside.
It's fun to catch fish, you know, but man, crappie chowder is like on my horizon. I feel like it's so good.
We'll have to pass a few recipes along, maybe. All right. Well, as always, have your own wild time and get out there and enjoy nature. Until we chat again, I'm Carol.
I'm Kelly.